It's 1979. Gas prices are climbing. Insurance companies are hunting muscle cars like predators. And Detroit is scared. The glory days of 400 cubic inches and 10.5.1 compression are over. The Clean Air Act has tightened its grip. Catalytic converters choke exhaust. Horsepower ratings have fallen off a cliff. A Pontiac Trans Am that once boasted 370 horsepower now struggles to clear 200. The same car that terrorized streets in 1970 is now being outrun by economy cars from Japan. But inside Pontiac's engineering department, someone refuses to accept that the party is over, and what almost nobody knows is Pontiac's answer to the muscle car crisis wasn't bigger displacement. It wasn't a return to high compression, it wasn't some miracle carburetor or exotic camshaft, it was boost. Most people have no idea that in 1980, Pontiac built a factory turbocharged V8. Not in the 2000s, not in the 1990s, in 1980, at the absolute bottom of the horsepower era, when Corvettes were making less than 200 horsepower, when Mustangs had four-cylinder engines, when the entire American automotive industry had basically given up on performance, Pontiac said no. You think you know the story of the 1970s muscle car collapse? Not like this, because this is the story of the 301 Turbo, a bold experiment, a desperate gamble, and an engine that almost rewrote Pontiac's future, before it backfired in spectacular fashion. To understand why the 301 Turbo even existed, you have to understand the crisis. And not just a little crisis, a catastrophe. In 1970, Pontiac's 400 cubic inch V8 could run 10.5.1 compression, breathe through big valves, and spin to 5,500 RPM without breaking a sweat. That engine made real power. Dyno verified, tire shredding, neighborhood waking power. Buyers walked into dealerships expecting muscle, and Pontiac delivered. But by 1975, compression ratios had dropped below 8.5.1. Leaded fuel was gone. Emissions equipment strangled airflow. Advertised horsepower plummeted. Every year, the numbers got worse. Every year, the engines got softer. Every year, the soul of the muscle car faded a little more. By 1979, the standard Pontiac 301 V8 was rated at just 135 horsepower in California trim. 135 from a V8, an 8-cylinder engine making less power than a modern Honda Civic. That's less than some 4-cylinders make today. That's less than what your grandmother's crossover makes right now. Think about that for a moment. A 301 cubic inch V8, weaker than a turbocharged 4-cylinder from 2024. The 301 itself was a downsized small block designed for the fuel crisis. It wasn't born from passion, it was born from desperation. With a 4.00-inch bore and a short 3.00-inch stroke, it displaced 301 cubic inches. Compression ratios hovered around 8.0.1 to survive low-octane unleaded fuel. The block was lighter than Pontiac's older 400 and 455 castings, with thinner cylinder walls and reduced main webbing to save weight and cost. The heads flowed less air. The cam was mild. Everything about it screamed economy. It wasn't built for glory. It was built for survival. It was built to pass emissions tests. It was built to sip unleaded fuel and run forever without complaining. But Pontiac engineers saw something different. They looked at that low compression ratio. They looked at the short stroke. They looked at the lightweight rotating assembly. And they asked a dangerous question. What if we add a turbocharger? See, low compression is usually a weakness. It means less power from each combustion event. But with forced induction, low compression becomes an advantage. Less cylinder pressure means more room for boost. More room for boost means more potential power. The same weakness that made the 301 embarrassing could make it extraordinary. At the time, turbocharging was still exotic in America. The Buick V6 Turbo program was in its early stages, barely proven. Porsche was making headlines with the 930 Turbo, scaring wealthy drivers with snap oversteer and sudden boost. Saab had experimented with turbos in Europe, but a turbocharged American V8 in a mainstream production car? That was a risk nobody had taken before. Detroit didn't do turbos. Detroit did cubic inches. Detroit did big blocks and aggressive camshafts. Turbos were foreign, turbos were complicated, turbos were scary. But Pontiac went there anyway. In 1980, Pontiac launched the Turbo Trans Am. Under its hood sat the 301 Turbo, and it represented everything Pontiac hoped could save American performance. On paper, it didn't look outrageous. The engine kept its 4.0-inch bore and 3.00-inch stroke. Displacement remained 301 cubic inches. Compression ratio dropped further to around 7.6.1 to handle boost safely. The turbocharger was a single Garrett TBO305 unit, blowing through a draw-through carburetor setup. No intercooler to cool the compressed air. No electronic boost control to fine-tune performance. Just raw, mechanical boost fed through a Rochester Quadrajet carburetor. Official output was rated at 210 horsepower at 4,400 RPM and 345 lb-ft of torque at just 2,800 RPM. 210 horsepower doesn't sound impressive today. Your neighbor's Camry probably makes that. But in 1980, that made it the most powerful engine in the Trans Am lineup. More powerful than the Chevrolet 305. More torque than anything else you could get in a GM F-body that year. More grunt than most competitors could offer at any price. And that torque number, 345 lb-ft, was the key. Because torque is what moves the car. Horsepower is what sells magazines. But torque is what pins you to the seat. Torque is what spins tires. Torque is what makes you grin like an idiot at every green light. On the street, when the turbo spooled, it hit hard. Drivers reported a surge at around 2,500 RPM. Below that, it felt lazy, almost disappointing, like any other emissions-choked V8 of the era. But above that threshold, when the boost gauge started climbing, it came alive. The exhaust note changed, the car squatted, the rear tires started searching for grip. For a brief moment, it felt like 1970 again. Car and Driver tested a 1980 Turbo Trans Am and recorded 0-60 mph in about 7.6 seconds and a quarter mile in the mid-15-second range at roughly 90 mph. Those numbers don't seem remarkable now, but context matters. Not earth-shattering, but respectable in a decade where many V8s struggled to break into the 16s. In a decade where Corvettes were running high 15s. In a decade where the entire industry had basically surrendered. And yet, there was a problem. A big problem. The 301 block was never designed for boost. Remember, this was a lightweight casting, built to save money, built to be economical. The main webs were thinner than the old 400 and 455 blocks. The crankshaft was cast iron, not forged steel. The pistons were cast aluminum with relatively thin ringlands. The bottom end was designed to survive 135 horsepower, not handle the repeated hammer blows of forced induction. At 7.61 compression, Pontiac relied heavily on boost to make power. Factory boost levels were around 9 psi. That sounds conservative by modern standards. But 9 psi on a fragile block designed for economy use. What could possibly go wrong? Everything. Early testing revealed detonation issues. Without an intercooler, intake air temperatures skyrocketed under boost. Hot air is less dense. Less dense air means less power. But more importantly, hot air combined with boost means knock, detonation, the sound of pistons being destroyed from the inside. The draw-through carb setup meant fuel and air were mixed before the turbo, not after. That created fuel distribution problems. Some cylinders ran lean, some ran rich. Throttle response was unpredictable and limited tuning flexibility. Step on the gas and you never quite knew what you were going to get. Pontiac tried to fight knock with an electronic spark control system. It monitored engine load and pulled timing under boost, reducing cylinder pressure before detonation could occur. When it worked, it was clever. ahead of its time, really, a preview of the computer-controlled engines that would dominate the 1990s. When it didn't work, pistons melted. Mechanics began seeing engines with cracked ringlands. Head gaskets would fail under sustained boost. Oil control became a nightmare. Turbochargers ran extremely hot, mounted close to the exhaust manifold where temperatures could exceed 1,400 degrees Fahrenheit. Oil coking in the center section could destroy bearings within months. One technician reportedly said, "The oil looked like it had been through a frying pan. Black, thick, burned beyond recognition after just a few thousand miles of spirited driving." Owners who babied their cars fared better. Owners who drove them hard learned expensive lessons. But Pontiac didn't back down. In 1981, they refined the system. They introduced a computer-controlled carburetor with more sophisticated fuel metering. They updated the spark management system. They improved underhood heat management with better shielding and insulation. Horsepower was rated at 200, torque at 340 lb-ft, slightly lower on paper due to rating changes and conservative tuning, but drivability improved significantly. The 1981 cars were better, more refined, more reliable, less likely to explode. But the damage was done. The reputation had been established, and here's what most people don't realize. In stock form, the 301 turbo was conservative. 9 psi was just scratching the surface of what forced induction could do. Pontiac engineers knew the limits of the hardware, so they stayed well within them. But the potential was there, waiting. Enthusiasts quickly discovered that with minor tweaks, boost adjustments, freer flowing exhaust, better fuel, improved ignition timing, you could wake it up. Bump boost to 12 psi, and power could climb well beyond 250 horsepower, maybe 280 on a good day with the right combination of parts. Suddenly, you had Trans Am that could run with much more expensive European machinery. But that was living on borrowed time. Every extra pound of boost shortened the engine's lifespan. The bottom end simply wasn't built for sustained abuse. Push it too far, and bearings would start to show copper. Oil pressure would drop under high RPM. The crank would flex. The block's main caps, only 2-bolt from the factory, would protest with alarming sounds. Pontiac engineers knew the limits. They were walking a tightrope between innovation and catastrophe, between performance and reliability, between giving customers what they wanted and keeping warranty costs manageable. And then the real nightmare started. Quality control issues plagued early cars. Assembly line inconsistency meant some 301 turbos left the factory perfectly tuned while others were disasters waiting to happen. Some buyers complained of turbo lag so severe the car felt slower than a naturally aspirated V8 until boost kicked in. 3 seconds of waiting at every stoplight before the car remembered it was supposed to be fast. Others experienced overheating. Underhood temperatures were extreme, especially in summer traffic. Plastic vacuum lines would crack from heat exposure. Sensors would fail randomly. Boost would spike or disappear without warning. The complexity scared mechanics. This wasn't a simple carbureted small block anymore. It had boost control solenoids, electronic spark management, pressure switches, wastegate actuators. In 1980, that was cutting-edge technology and intimidating for service departments used to points ignition and mechanical fuel pumps. Dealership techs weren't always trained to diagnose it properly. Many had never seen a turbo system before the Trans Am arrived. Misadjusted wastegates and vacuum leaks led to underboost or overboost conditions. Either the car felt weak and disappointed customers, or it broke and angered them. Meanwhile, insurance companies still treated the turbo Trans Am like a performance car. They saw turbo and assumed the worst. Premiums climbed. Young buyers, Pontiac's traditional customer base, couldn't afford coverage. Fuel economy wasn't dramatically better than other V8s despite the smaller displacement. And the market was shifting towards smaller, more efficient cars. The Trans Am suddenly seemed like a relic, even with its space-age turbocharger. Production numbers tell the story. In 1980, Pontiac built roughly 7,000 turbo-trans AMs. Not a massive number, but respectable for a new technology in an uncertain market. In 1981, that number dropped significantly as word spread about reliability concerns. Total production of 301 turbo engines across both years remained relatively limited compared to millions of small block Chevys rolling off assembly lines. It was a niche within a niche, a bold experiment that the market wasn't quite ready for, and then it was over. By the end of 1981, Pontiac discontinued the 301 Turbo. No fanfare, no announcement. It simply disappeared from the options list. The 301 itself would soon fade away entirely. GM corporate engine sharing policies tightened throughout the 1980s. Chevrolet small blocks became the standard across all divisions. Pontiac lost control of its unique V8 designs. The era of true Pontiac engines designed, engineered, and built by Pontiac, was ending. But here's the twist. The 301 Turbo wasn't a complete failure. In many ways, it was ahead of its time. Frustratingly, tragically ahead of its time. It proved that forced induction could restore performance without massive displacement. It demonstrated that even under strict emissions rules, you could create torque and excitement. It showed that there was another path forward besides surrendering to mediocrity. The electronic spark control system was a preview of the computer-managed engines to come in the 1980s and 1990s, when knock sensors and electronic fuel injection would make forced induction truly reliable. The idea was right. The execution was flawed. The timing was terrible. Buick would later perfect the formula with the turbocharged 3.8-liter V6 in the Grand National, running 14-second quarter miles straight from the factory by 1987. Intercoolers to cool intake air. Stronger blocks designed from the start for boost. Better electronic fuel injection. Better tuning. The idea that Pontiac pioneered worked brilliantly when the technology matured. Pontiac just tried it first, with the wrong foundation, with yesterday's block trying to carry tomorrow's idea. Imagine if the 301 Turbo had been built on the old 400 block. Imagine forged internals instead of cast, 4-bolt mains instead of 2, an intercooler from day one to control intake temperatures. 10 or 12 psi safely without fear of detonation. That 345 lb-ft could have become 400 lb-ft. Horsepower could have touched 300 in 1980 when most V8s were gasping for air at 150. But that's not the engine they had. That's not the budget GM approved. That's not the corporate reality Pontiac faced. They had a lightweight 301, a shrinking engineering budget, and corporate pressure to share parts with other divisions. They made the best of what they had. They swung for the fences with an aluminum bat. So what's the legacy? Today, the 1980-1981 Turbo Trans Am has become a cult classic. Not because it was the fastest car of its era, not because it dominated racetracks, not because it was perfect, but because it dared to be different in a time of retreat. Because it represented defiance when the entire industry had given up. Collectors now seek clean examples with increasing desperation. The distinctive turbo hood bulge has become iconic. The Turbo 4.9 decals mark these cars as something special. Underneath, that compact V8 with its Garrett turbo perched like a mechanical heart waiting to beat. Values have climbed steadily. Survivors are rare. Many were modified, abused, or scrapped when engines failed. Finding an unmolested example with original turbo components intact has become genuinely difficult. What was once an unreliable curiosity has become a time capsule of automotive courage. It represents a moment when Pontiac refused to surrender. When engineers said, "We can do better," even when accountants and executives were saying, "Just give up." Yes, it had flaws, serious flaws. Yes, engines failed, sometimes spectacularly. Yes, it scared dealers and frustrated owners and created warranty nightmares across the country. But it also proved something important. Even in the darkest years of American performance, engineers were still dreaming. still pushing, still refusing to accept that muscle was dead forever. The 301 Turbo didn't save Pontiac, it didn't reverse the horsepower slide overnight, it didn't bring back the glory days of 1970, but it planted a seed that would grow into the turbocharged revolution we see today, where 4 cylinders make 300 horsepower and V6 outrun old big blocks, and even Mustangs come with EcoBoost engines. So when you look at that 210 horsepower rating, don't laugh. Look at the context. Look at 7.61 compression, 9 psi of boost, and 345 lb-ft of torque in 1980. Look at a lightweight 4.0-inch bore, 3.0-inch stroke V8 fighting emissions regulations with forced induction when nobody else dared. Look at engineers who refused to accept defeat. It was bold, it was risky, it was imperfect, and it backfired. Just enough to end the experiment before it could evolve. But without experiments like the 301 Turbo, the modern turbo era might have arrived much later. Someone had to go first. Someone had to take the risk. Someone had to prove that boost was the answer, even if the execution wasn't perfect. Pontiac went first. Pontiac paid the price, and the rest of the industry learned from their sacrifice. In the end, Pontiac's 301 Turbo was a gamble on the future, built with yesterday's block and tomorrow's idea. It stumbled because the foundation couldn't carry the vision, because the technology hadn't caught up to the ambition, because sometimes being ahead of your time means suffering the consequences of impatience. Yet for 2 short years, it gave the Trans Am something rare in the early 1980s. Something most performance cars couldn't offer, something that had nearly disappeared from American showrooms entirely. Hope. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of the most misunderstood engines of the muscle car era, let me know in the comments what you want to see next. Another forgotten turbo experiment, a legendary V8 rivalry, or a hidden engineering story from Detroit's wildest years. And make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter.